Hello, psychology folks. Welcome to a new week. I know you are probably spending just a lot of your time studying for Friday's test, and hopefully you can take a break to listen to this video lecture because we just have a limited amount of time and we still have a lot of material to cover. We're going to need to jump right into personality and start that section. This won't be a particularly long lecture. There will be a sort of a hands-on project at the end, and you'll be writing a paragraph about that. It won't be that difficult. You'll be taking a personality test online, and that's what you'll write the paragraph about. Some of the phrases and the concepts that we talk about in this section you're going to find familiar. If you remember back to the very beginning of our class, we talked about the different approaches to psychology, psychodynamic, cognitive, humanistic. See, there's my memory going again. Humanistic, evolutionary. And it's not surprising to think that the psychologists that approached psychology in that way would also build their theories of personality in the same framework. And so the theories of personality include psychodynamic perspectives, humanistic, biological, cognitive, and so forth. And so we will get into those. To start with, let's look here above my head at the definition of personality. What is your personality? I mean, who are you? A personality is defined as a pattern of enduring, distinctive thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that characterize the way in which an individual adapts to the world. I think one of the key words here is enduring. When we're talking about personality, we're talking about a pattern of thoughts and emotions that happen constantly or consistently. We're not talking about how you may feel and act during a bad day. That doesn't necessarily define your personality. But your personality is a pattern of enduring and distinctive thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And it characterizes the way that you adapt to the world. Reminds me of also going back to the beginning of the semester of William James and his stream of consciousness perspective. The fact that psychology is all about how we deal with all of the data that's streaming towards us, and you can make that connection to what we just got done studying about memory and about the sensory memory, all of this streaming information that's constantly coming into us, and how we focus, what we focus on, our attention, and how that makes us who we are. So that is the description of personality. So the first approach to personality is named for the first approach to psychology that we discussed, the psychodynamic perspective. The psychodynamic perspective of personality emphasizes that personality, from this perspective, is primarily unconscious, outside of our awareness. Who we are is not something that we're consciously choosing, but it's driven by things in our subconscious mind that we're not aware of. And so, the fact that you watch a particular movie and it makes you cry, or you suddenly feel sad, or something makes you happy, all this, according to the psychodynamic perspective, is caused by unconscious things in your mind that you're not aware of. And of course, the father, more or less, of the psychodynamic perspective was Sigmund Freud. And we talked about Sigmund earlier in class. According to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, the sexual drive is the most important motivator of all human activity. There is nothing else more important. And remember, psychodynamic means an unconscious emotion, an unconscious drive. And so, according to what Freud believed, is that our unconscious sexual desires and drives are what motivates our day-to-day activity. Where Freud came up with this is, as a therapist, he primarily treated women, and during the time in which he treated women, uh, he treated them for what he referred to as hysteria. In Freud's time, hysteria was defined as an illness that involved sometimes partial paralysis, hallucinations, and nervousness. You might associate it with maybe a nervous breakdown today. But at this time, hysteria was thought to only apply to women, and in fact, it's my understanding that the term hysteria actually comes from the Greek word hystera, which means uterus, and so hysteria was associated with women at this point. And so Freud treated a lot of women, and Freud believed that the Victorian rules of that day were repressing feelings within the woman's consciousness. And because these Victorian rules were repressing the desire for pleasure, that the unconscious tension that created caused these, hysterical symptoms. And so that's what led Freud to believe that there were unconscious pressures in our minds that would lead us to act in certain ways, even though we didn't realize that's why we were acting that way. Freud also believed in what's referred to as the Oedipus complex, which is where young boys are jealous of their fathers. It won't go into a lot of detail, but that also sort of helped coin the phrase "anatomy is destiny." So that according to Freud, whether you were male or female would greatly determine your personality. Not a view that's held today, but you can sort of think about the time in which Freud lived, and that's what you got. So this view that Freud had, that we have these unconscious pressures caused by childhood events or trauma or just things that happen, or caused by repression of the of society. We have these unconscious desires that are sort of like a furnace that builds up steam, and then the steam drives us to do things, or like a steam engine. And that led to Freud's structure of personality. So what you need to know about Freud's structure of personality is it's sort of like an iceberg. And in Freud's iceberg, you know how an iceberg, most of the iceberg is underwater. In this case, the water level is consciousness. Everything above the water is conscious, things that you're aware of, that you're awake for. Everything below the water is the unconscious. These are things that are there in your mind, according to Freud. I don't know why I keep wanting to call him Floyd. Floyd the barber. There in your mind, according to Freud, but you're not aware that these things are there. But the pressures of these unconscious things push up into consciousness. So, in this iceberg of personality that Freud proposes, you have the id, and the id is basically it is the unleashed, uncontrolled, raw human, almost the human animal, for lack of a better word. All the desires, everything that you want to do, completely unfettered and unburdened by any kind of morality or rules. It's the pleasure principle. It's the I want to do everything that makes me feel good. That's the id, and that's at the base of this big unconscious iceberg. Now, in addition to the id, we have the ego. And the ego understands that the id can't have everything it wants. That all of these things that the id wants to do aren't appropriate in society and for human beings. And so the ego helps manage all this pressure. And as the ego manages this pressure, the ego and look, this, remember, this is all still happening unconsciously. The ego helps to control what comes out of this boiler room of pressure and makes it up into the surface of consciousness. And then in addition, you have the superego. And the superego, that's morality. Those are rules. This is the part of us that wants to do what's right. You might actually call this the conscience. And so the conscience is the, I guess the perfect human being that you feel you need to be. The ego is the part of the personality that tries to let what the id wants out just enough so that you can relieve some of this pressure, but you don't get arrested or stoned to death or anything else. And so essentially you have these three facets of your personality: this wild and crazy id, the superego, which is like the angel sitting on your shoulder saying this is what you're supposed to do, and then the ego, which is the poor part of your personality that's in charge of making all this work together and allowing some portion of these things into consciousness. Uh, but the way that Freud's idea works is you don't know these things are there. You don't realize that all the stuff that the ego is pushing up into the conscious part of the iceberg is actually welling up from this big section down here. All you're aware of is what's happening there in consciousness. It kind of makes you wonder how things like the internet has affected the id, because in Freud's day, he was dealing with Victorian sensibilities, and your access to the world and knowledge of the world was somewhat limited. You think about how the internet has sort of affected us, opened our eyes or our unconscious eyes to things. How much pressure in this sort of wild and crazy part of us that just wants to go out and do everything is affected by all of the input that we get from essentially all aspects of society. I think we showed this at the beginning of class, but yeah, this is my favorite explanation. Well, a sort of semi-explanation of Freud's theory in a Batman theme. In this case, the id, the wild and crazy, I don't want to be held back, I want to do what I want to do, is the Joker. Actually, when you think about it, small child with until they reach a certain age, they don't have that moral imperative. They just want to do what they want to do. A young child can be pure id. In this case, the id would be the Joker. The ego is Batman, and Harvey Dent's the superego, which is the morality piece. I'm not sure Harvey Dent works quite so well, but essentially you've got Batman trying to manage the id and the superego. That gives you some sense. And in case I've not done a particularly great job of explaining this, this little video might do a better job. Let's see if we can make this work here.
Freud thought that the personality develops as a result of conflict between people's pleasure-seeking and aggressive impulses, and the way their desires for pleasure and aggression fit in society's rules. Our pleasure and aggression impulses come from our innate drives. Freud theorized that the conflict between our innate drives and the rules for society centers on three interacting parts of the mind: the id, the ego, and the superego.
The id is a real pleasure seeker, and it wants immediate gratification. It wants sex.
Come here, baby.
It's into aggression.
Hey, I'll smash you to bits.
And what it wants right away.
Now. Give it to me now.
The ego tries to meet the id's needs the best it can without letting it run wild and wreak havoc. The ego operates under the reality principle, keeping desires realistic and under control so they can bring long-term pleasure instead of pain and chaos. The ego mediates between the wild desires of the id and the restraints imposed by the superego.
The superego is like a conscience that represents society's norms and values. It goes one step past the ego by considering not only the real, but also the ideal. The superego thinks about how we ought to behave according to our society. It uses ideas about morality that come from our parents and our environment, and gives us a strong sense of right and wrong. Our superegos can make us feel very proud or very guilty. It often opposes the id, and the ego works really hard to reconcile the two.
Freud said that
So, from that lovely little play there, that helps us understand that Freud had this idea. There we go. Move that back over. The Freud had this idea that this wild little green creature, like you saw in that video, in our subconscious, was just constantly trying to run amok, and our personalities are developed and created and driven by that crazy little green monster. What's interesting is you wonder, did Freud actually feel that his own personality was driven by that, or did he just view that as the personality of others? But as you might imagine, not everybody bought into that theory. Psychologists, as Freud's theory evolved, came to view the concept as, there has to be more to it than that. One in particular was Karen Horney, and Horney stated that in addition to those drives, those unconscious needs, that socio-cultural influences need to be considered. It's not just the wild and crazy green monster. According to Horney's theory of personality, it's the need for security, not sex, as the prime motive in human existence. And so while she still felt that we're driven by these unconscious needs, that it was the need for security that drove out of that unconscious boiler room, and that the need for us to feel secure made us act in the way we did. Another psychologist in the psychodynamic realm is Carl Jung. And you hear a lot about Carl Jung. I think I like the glasses, he's a cool looking guy. But he had this interesting concept. He believed that personality is associated with the very beginning of human existence, and that altogether we are part of a collective unconscious. This goes back to something Freud believed, which is sort of bizarre but interesting. You remember Freud believed that we have this unconscious part of us that we're not aware of consciously. Well, Freud believed that on some level our unconscious minds communicate with each other. So as I'm talking to you, maybe it's the tone of my voice, maybe it's body language, maybe it's how I say things. For whatever reason, maybe it's what I do. But for whatever reason, Freud believed that I can unconsciously communicate, and your unconscious will pick up on that. And so essentially, as we communicate together on a conscious level, there's also a communication that goes on between human beings on an unconscious level that we're not aware of. And so Jung took that kind of a step further, and if you think about it, if all humans together have this unconscious network of communication, Jung believed that we have a collective unconscious, that almost like a network of neurons. All of these humans who communicate with each other back to the beginning of time have been building this sort of collective unconscious, and you think about the various things about humanity that are similar. Jung called these things archetypes. He believed that we had universal images in our collective unconscious that predispose us to respond to our environment in certain ways. It's sort of like, you remember the concept of memory, that we have certain schemas and patterns or scripts that we're aware of, like going into a restaurant, we know what that's. Well, Jung believed that these archetypes that we have unconsciously developed these patterns of personality that guide how we react. Some of these archetypes that Jung believed existed were the anima, which is the passive feminine personality, the animus, the assertive masculine personality, and he felt we all had these inside us. The persona, the public mask that we put on. Some of the other archetypes, and again, he felt that these were patterns that humans fall into because they've been built by this years and years and years of unconscious development and communication. The shadow, which is the unconscious, the father, which is the authority figure, the mother, nurturing, comforting, the child, the longing for innocence, the wise old man, the hero, the maiden, the trickster. He felt that these were all archetypes that have evolved in our unconsciousness over the years. And when we think about it, these are also pretty much all the characters that you see in modern movies. Jung might say that the reason we write all these characters into movies and why those movies work is because we recognize these archetypes. We recognize these schemas or patterns. And Jung, this evolves actually into the personality tests of today. If you've ever taken a personality test, it's possible that the personality test were based on some of Jung's theories, that we have different patterns of personality that we employ, that we connect to. In fact, the personality test we're going to take in a few minutes is based on some of Jung's theories. Another individual who took the psychodynamic approach a little further was Alfred Adler. Adler was an early follower of Freud. Although I call him Floyd again. Maybe that's a Freudian slip, or is that a Floydian slip? Adler didn't buy that we had this completely unconscious drive. He felt that things from our childhood did influence who we were, but he believed it was more of an individual effect. Adler developed what's referred to as individual psychology. He believed that people are motivated by purpose and goals, that the way we behave is often compensation for weakness, and he also, Adler came up with the whole birth order concept, that birth order affects our motivation, that the firstborn, they suffer from being displaced, and so they're traumatized in childhood because they've been displaced by the younger child. Yeah, the youngest child is most likely to be spoiled and all of the effects that occur there, and that middle children are the healthiest because they neither face the displacement or the being spoiled. And so this idea, and I talked to people that have said, yeah, it's right. Firstborns have issues. The youngest, they have issues, and the middle kids, sometimes the middle kids are okay. But I think we've all maybe had some experience with that. But yeah, that was Adler's evolution of psychodynamic theory. So the core principles, the core of the psychodynamic perspective of psychology are that personality is determined by both current experience and early life experience, that personality can be better understood by examining it developmentally. In other words, how did it develop? What gave rise to our personality early in life? We mentally transform our experiences, giving them meaning that shape our personality. So the things that happen to us, particularly as we're younger, we transform them into meaning. The mind is not all consciousness. There are unconscious motives in our minds. And then finally, our inner worlds often conflict with outer demands. What we want and desire and want to do is often in conflict with what we actually can do, with what we're allowed to do, with rules and limitations, maybe financial or whatever. And that conflict drives us to behave in certain ways. So that is, in a nutshell, your psychodynamic perspective core principles. Moving on to our next perspective, the humanistic perspective. Let me move out of the way here. In some ways, the humanistic perspective sort of seems like the polar opposite of the psychodynamic perspective, because in the psychodynamic perspective is that all of what we are comes from these unconscious drives, and we don't even understand them. We just know that something's driving us to be the way we are. That's the psychodynamic perspective. The humanistic perspective, and you may remember this again from the humanistic approach to psychology, is that we as people have a capacity for personal growth and positive human qualities, and we have the ability to control our lives to achieve what we desire. So whereas the psychodynamic approach to personality is that there's something, this boiler room of emotion and conflict and drive inside us that's sort of pushing out and pushing us to be a certain way. The humanistic perspective says that we have goals that are out here, and these goals out here, these things that we want to do, they pull us. And so rather than being sort of pushed and forced to be a certain way by the psychodynamic perspective, the humanistic perspective is that there are goals that we can aspire to. We can desire to be better. We can look and say, that's the kind of person I want to be, and our choices control who we are. We choose to be the way that we are. Now, you kind of get into a murky area in that, because you look at some people that maybe have personality issues, and you say, well, did they really choose to be the way they are? People with problems, if you're dealing with depression and other things, are you choosing that? You'd think that if it's all up to our own choice to be, to follow our dreams, why aren't we all following them? What is it about us that means we're not striving for those positive human growth qualities? And so that's one of the big questions of the humanistic perspective. One of the more famous proponents of the humanistic perspective, and actually one of my favorites, was Abraham Maslow. And Maslow believed that we can learn about personality by looking at the best examples of human beings, people who he called are self-actualized and capable of peak experiences, sort of the maximum expression of what it means to be a great human being. Maslow did a lot of research on people who he believed were those self-actualized people, the people who had reached sort of the pinnacle of their personality evolution. Interestingly, a lot of them, most of them wouldn't talk to him for his research, because they tended to not want the attention, or some of them were deceased. But people who Maslow believed were self-actualized and capable of these peak experiences included individuals such as Albert Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Eleanor Roosevelt, and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson. When you talk about Maslow, you frequently will see Maslow's personality pyramid. I know this is not the food pyramid, though it does remind you a little bit of it. And this also maybe explains why, we talked about the humanistic perspective. If the idea is you can follow your dreams, for lack of a better phrase, why isn't everybody following their dreams? Why aren't we all living that perfect self-actualized life? Maslow believed that we had different levels of needs in this pyramid, and you couldn't move up the pyramid to the next level of evolution until you met all the needs on this level? Is it because, and we'll say, for example, the basic physiological needs, the need to breathe, the need to eat, the need to drink, the need for sex, the need for sleep, the need to use the bathroom, all these very basic needs. According to Maslow's theory, if these needs aren't met, this is all you're going to worry about. If you're having difficulty finding food and you're starving, or water, or if you can't get sleep, or if these things are denied you, you're not going to be dealing with creativity, morality, spontaneity. No, your focus is on making sure you've got all this stuff taken care of. And once you've got all this stuff taken care of, and you're not worried about any of these things, then you're going to move up to the next level, and you're going to focus on, according to the pyramid, the security of your body, employment, having resources. Here's where morality comes in: the family, health, property, all the things that you can focus on once you've got all these dealt with. And then once this is the safety. You've met the needs. Now you feel safe. Well, once you have established your safety, then you can move forward and start dealing with the love and belonging platform. And so you can look for friendship, develop a family, develop sexual intimacy, all the things that you're probably not necessarily going to focus a lot on if safety is a concern. And then once these are achieved, the esteem level means you can develop your self-esteem, confidence, achievement, the respect of others, respected by others. And then when all of this is established, according to Maslow, you evolve to the very top of the pyramid and focus on morality, creativity, spontaneity, solving problems, having a lack of prejudice, and acceptance of the facts. In other words, seeing the world for what it is and then doing something about it. And so Maslow believed that individuals like Einstein and Jefferson and Emerson had achieved this top part of the pyramid. So let's say, for example, you were dealing with depression and you went to Maslow as a therapist. Maslow's going to start talking about, well, let's look at where this is coming from. Which of your needs are not being met, and what can we do to meet those needs for safety or for love and belonging or esteem to move you on up the pyramid. Another psychologist very instrumental in the humanistic approach was Carl Rogers. And Rogers struggled to understand unhappiness. We talked a little bit about in the pyramid or just the basics of humanistic perspective. Why aren't people just moving right up to the top of the pyramid? Why are so many people unhappy? And that bothered Carl Rogers as well. He believed that we all are born with the raw ingredients for a fulfilling life. We're all born with all parts of the pyramid, but we need the right conditions in order to thrive. So if we don't have the right conditions in our lives, we're not going to thrive and achieve the top levels of the kind of life and personality that we want. So Rogers' perspective was that everyone needs unconditional positive regard. In other words, we all need to be accepted exactly the way we are, no conditions, no strings attached, completely accepted for who we are, and that's it, period. And that when that doesn't happen, when people only value us or accept us when we behave in certain ways, that puts what he called conditions of worth on our lives. In other words, you are only worth something if you meet these conditions, and as a result, there is unhappiness. Now, that actually sounds to me kind of similar to Freud and the psychodynamic perspective, in that you've got you've got the green monster inside that wants what it wants and wants to do what it wants to do and doesn't want anybody telling it what it can't do, and when it's repressed, the pressure builds. This is different in that this is happening more consciously. It's not happening in the unconscious. We understand that we feel unhappy because we're not accepted, because there are conditions of behavior for acceptance or feeling like we're worth anything. So Roger's approach to therapy and his approach to people leading fulfilling lives was that to achieve happiness you have to receive unconditional positive regard, and that's respect, comfort, and love regardless of behavior. This is what Rogers would do, and psychologists who follow Rogers' perspective, when their patients come in and speak with them, no matter what the patients say, no matter how maybe they describe terrible things that they've done, terrible thoughts that they have, maybe shocking things, no matter what that individual says, the therapist would treat that individual with unconditional respect, comfort, and love. No matter what they said, it's unconditional, and that sort of helps get rid of that unhappiness and breaks that tension and pressure that's causing them to act in the way they act. And so Rogers felt that to achieve happiness, you had to have that unconditional positive regard, that you had to interact with people who are empathetic, sensitive, understanding listeners, and that you had to be genuine, that you had to be open with your feelings and drop all pretenses and facades. In other words, take the masks off. That to be happy, you had to be able to take off all the masks, the persona, and be who you are, and be accepted for who you are. And I think that strikes a chord with a lot of things that are happening today. That if you can achieve this, according to the humanistic perspective, you can achieve happiness. So, what is your personality like? Or what would a personality assessment say about you? So that's what I'm going to ask you to do, is to take a personality assessment right now. You can do it online. The one that we're going to do is the Jung Typology Test at the Human Metrics website. And you've probably heard of the Briggs-Myers test. This is it. It's a test that is based on Carl Jung's and what is her name, Isabel Briggs-Myers typology and approach to personality. And again, this is the approach similar to Jung's types, archetypes, that there are personality types, and your personality can be divided into these certain types. So what you need to do is go to the website, and there are 72 questions. They're not hard questions. Don't spend a lot of time, trying to figure out the right answer. There is no right answer. Go with your very first answer in your gut, and just go down the line. Click yes, no, yes, no, yes, no to the questions. There's the link there. I'm going to put a link right below this video lecture, so it should be that all you'll need to do is click on it. So go take the test. Click the button when you're done to score the test, and then there are two sections. When the test is done, you'll actually see 4 different areas you can click on. You just need to click on 2. Click on the self-awareness and personal growth section, because that has a description. What you're going to see, let me drag this over. You're going to see, once you score the test, something that looks like this: 4 letters, and those 4 letters are the description of your personality. They each stand for something that you can read about that. Once you score your test, read that section and the description of the personality type that this test says you are, and then just quickly read the career choices section, because what that's going to do is it's going to tell you, based on this personality test, what some good jobs are that you might consider. And then click reply and post a paragraph and about your results, and how well did the results of the test describe you. How much did they nail who you are, and were you surprised? Did you disagree or agree with the outcome of the test? And what do you think about those career choices? Do you think those careers, based on your test, do you think they actually would be something that you would be interested in. Maybe it's something that you've already chosen. Anyway, it doesn't have to be a long paragraph, just a short one. But tell us about your personality test and post it, and then you can go back to studying for exam number 3, and I will see you on Friday. So everybody, have a good week.